Hello and welcome to today's webinar, which is all about Amazon, SFP and FBA. Don't worry, we'll go through all of the acronyms one by one. But I just want to, first of all, welcome Nish, who's from Olsam, and he has a ton of expertise. Olsam are an FBA acquirer. What that means is they acquire FBA businesses which have got potential, but perhaps the owner is retiring, has taken it as far as they can, or has got other pressures and want to exit their business. Olsam acquire them with a view to growing them exponentially. And for instance, we're not going to discuss it much today, but there's been a lot of problems with Brexit and selling into Europe. And that may be something that you look at your business and think, actually, I'm just not going to sell to Europe anymore. Olsam have got the expertise in-house to take that business, power it into Europe, and indeed around the world, and grow it forward, and gives you a way of monetizing your business as you exit. So welcome, Nish. Tell us a little bit about yourself, because I believe, did you used to work for Amazon?
Yes. Hi, Chris. Hi, everyone joining. Yeah, I did used to work for Amazon. So I'll give you a quick potted history. So I worked for 4 years in Amazon Marketplace in the UK. So I don't know if anybody will know who's listening, but basically Amazon Marketplace is structured in a way that there are different products. So FBA is a product that Amazon have that they sell to sellers, and SFP, Seller Fulfilled Prime, is another product. And so around each of these products sit a sales team who basically sell the product to sellers, a product team who work on the product itself, make changes, improvements, updates, and then a program team. And the program team basically manage the sales team, set targets at an EU level. And so I was fortunate enough to work across all three of those teams during my time at Amazon, across FBA and SFP. And so that's what I did at Amazon. And then I joined Olsam this year. And I head up the business development side of Olsam.
So that's great, because I guess if you've been working at Amazon, you saw things from Amazon's point of view, because often, not just Amazon to be fair, but many marketplaces will do things which merchants or sellers might not necessarily approve of, and they might wonder why it's been done, because it makes their business harder. It's tougher to keep up with the demands. But hopefully today you'll be able to give us some insights from Amazon's point of view on why they're doing these things. And interesting month, by the way, because obviously last week Jeff Bezos blasted off into space, so he's no longer CEO. We've got a new CEO as well. I don't know if you know the new CEO and if you've got any insights to share there.
So yeah, the new CEO is Andy Jassy. So he used to head up Amazon Web Services. So that's
AWS, yeah.
Yeah, AWS, exactly. So up until I guess last week he was CEO of AWS, and now he's become CEO of Amazon.
I think he's been at Amazon for 20 odd years.
Yeah, I think longer than that. A lot of the senior management at Amazon have been around Amazon for over 20 years. So like the senior management team, internally they're called the S team. So that's basically Jeff and everybody who used to report into him. They've all been around for 20 plus years.
Anyway, let's dive straight in. There's two things I wanted to talk about today: Seller Fulfilled Prime and FBA, Fulfillment by Amazon. So first of all, let's just cover what those programs do. So FBA is putting your stock into Amazon's warehouse and letting them pick, pack and fulfill it for you. What's the advantage of doing that as opposed to MFN or Merchant Fulfilled Network, which is just selling on Amazon and fulfilling your own orders?
Yeah. So FBA is exactly what you just said. So just to very quickly recap what it is. So as a seller, I would source my products, put the listing all up, whatever, on Seller Central. I would control the pricing, all of that, but I would then send large quantities in bulk of that product to an Amazon fulfillment center. Amazon store it, I pay for that storage. And then when a customer orders it, Amazon will pick, pack, deliver the product, deal with returns, customer service, all of that. So basically you're leveraging Amazon's logistics, which is probably best in the world. So that's basically what FBA is. And then
can I just ask, as someone from the inside that's worked for Amazon, why did Amazon create the FBA program? It's obviously a huge logistics issue. Their background is running a marketplace and running AWS so they can run their own servers. But what was the sort of driving force behind FBA that made them want to do it?
I think so. There's a couple of things. I think the first thing is customer experience. So, I mean, anyone from Amazon will always talk about customer experience. All decision making internally is always made around customer experience. So, I mean, I don't know exactly what the source was, but definitely Amazon realized that their logistics, their logistical ability was good enough that they could deliver items super quickly. And we've seen that over time as well. You know, things being delivered from 3 to 5 days down to next day, now same day within a couple of hours. So I think it was really focused on the customer and being able to deliver items to them as quickly as possible. But also, I think probably a belief in Amazon themselves that when they controlled all of that themselves, instead of outsourcing to different carriers, they could actually hit their internal metrics that they set. It's much more difficult to control something if you're outsourcing it to somebody else. And then you've seen just over the last few years, Amazon has really driven change outside of Amazon as well. So with everything being delivered pretty much next day, at least in the UK, you've seen all these other retailers and websites start to deliver next day as well. So they've also influenced change.
Yeah, and that is largely, I guess, been driven by Amazon Prime, which is the consumer side of FBA, which I pay my £79 a year. I can have unlimited free one-day deliveries. So almost anything I want to buy on Amazon, I'll get it tomorrow or sometimes today. And all of the other benefits, and obviously they've got to control the delivery experience for Prime, which is where FBA comes in and why FBA items are generally included in the Prime membership program, and MFN, Merchant Fulfilled Network products, are not included in FBA. And that brings us on nicely to the other thing I want to talk about today, which is SFP, or Seller Fulfilled Prime. So what's the difference between Merchant Fulfilled Network and Seller Fulfilled Prime?
Yeah. So if you're selling something on Merchant Fulfilled, you're controlling everything yourself. So as I said before, that the listings, all of that's very similar to FBA. But when a customer orders a product, you yourself pick, pack, and deliver it. Deal with the customer service returns. And the SFP program was introduced we launched in the UK in 2017 as a go-between between FBA and MFN. So on SFP, you get the Prime badge, which I should have mentioned before, but that gives any product that gets the Prime badge gets an uplift in sales. Depends on the product, but it always gets an uplift in sales. So you get the Prime badge, and as a customer, you in theory get next day or 2-day delivery. So that's the advantage of being on SFP. For a seller, and then so Amazon sort of 50% deal with the customer service. You sort of deal with the customer service 50%. That's basically what it is. You know, it's a way for sellers to be able to get the benefits of FBA without having to split their stock and send the inventory to Amazon.
So this sounds really good because I'm getting the benefits of qualifying for the Prime badge, but I'm keeping my stock. So if I'm selling on my own website, or maybe I've got a physical store, or I'm selling on other marketplaces, I've still got control of my stock rather than having it all sat in Amazon's warehouse.
Correct.
But what the whole point of this webinar was today is there's been some changes to both SFP and FBA. And I really want to dig into, first of all, exactly what has changed this year. But secondly, to try and look at how merchants can work with that change and the best route forward for them. So looking specifically at SFP at the moment, what are the recent changes with SFP that merchants are going to have to get to grips with?
Sure. So on the SFP side, there's a few changes. So first I'll go through if you're a UK-based seller, because it does differ slightly if you're UK-based or US-based or based in the EU. If you're a UK-based seller, there's basically two main changes. So one is around the collection times. The days of collection. Sorry. So previously it used to be you'd only have a collection with your carrier Monday to Friday. You wouldn't have to work on a Saturday or a Sunday. But now Amazon are enforcing collections over the weekend on at least one day. So on Saturday or Sunday, you need to have collections. And the second is on the cutoff. So there used to be a daily cutoff, which by default was 2 p.m. seller facing. So if any orders came in before 2 p.m., you as seller will need to pick, pack, and have it ready to give to your carrier the same day when they arrived at 3 p.m. or whatever. But now that's been extended so that you need to have be able to do same day delivery up until 4 p.m. Monday to Friday. So yeah, those are the two main changes for UK-based seller. For EU sellers, the cutoff changes are the same, but they don't need to do weekend collections. So yeah, those are the main changes.
So that's a pretty tough change for a merchant to have to deal with. I mean, first off, I've got to say, not many independent sellers have weekend collections. Monday to Friday, not a problem, but getting a courier on a Saturday or a Sunday, not very easy, and probably extra charges, relatively expensive. And just the lateness of the cutoff as well. Like you said, many sellers may have 2 p.m. cutoff, courier or Royal Mail arrives at 3 p.m. But now with a much later cutoff, that's also quite difficult to manage. I mean, what are you meant to do? Run down the Royal Mail delivery office or drop off at the courier office if the courier's already collected? So bearing in mind the sort of difficulties that merchants are facing, why has Amazon done this?
Yeah, it's a really good question. So basically, it all boils down to what I said before, which is customer experience, and in this case, speed. So under the old requirements, so let's say you had the cutoff is 2 p.m. and you're working Monday to Friday. Me as a customer, if I order something on a Friday after the cutoff, so let's say the cutoff's 2 p.m. So I order something at 3 p.m. on a Friday. If it's got a Prime badge on it, I would usually expect that to get delivered on a Saturday or a Sunday. But since it was SFP, the next collection for that seller would have happened not on a Saturday or a Sunday, would have happened on the Monday. So I order on a Friday, would be collected on a Monday. Earliest it would be delivered would be Tuesday, in some cases Wednesday. And then if you're on the old small and light template, on the small and light shipping template, which had an extra day's delivery promise, it could be delivered on the Thursday. So you're ordering something on a Friday. Exactly. So it's 6-day delivery promise in some cases. So from a customer's point of view, the value of Prime is that, you pay for Prime, you get, Prime Video and all of this, but the main thing is you get next day delivery, and in some cases same day delivery. And with SFP, it was being, extended a bit, 4, 5, 6 days. And like Amazon, we noticed this over time, right? And it just wasn't the sort of service that Prime was set out to be. And the main driver for that was the weekends, because you've got that 2.5 day block where you're just not going to get any collections. So totally appreciate from the seller's point of view. We've looked into SFP as well. Totally appreciate how it's super difficult, but that's why they introduced it.
So I can kind of understand that, because as a customer, I like being able to buy something and having it arrive faster. If it's something like, I've run out of batteries, the remote control's not working, I don't want to wait until Monday. If it's a Friday, I'd quite like them delivered on a Saturday. And there's lots of purchases that are quite time sensitive, but equally I have to say there's a lot that are not very time sensitive. But I can understand that Amazon, it's all about the customer experience, and basically that's what I guess they're saying to seller fulfilled Prime merchants is, hey, if you want to do seller fulfilled Prime, you've got to match our standards a bit more closely than we've allowed in the past to satisfy the customer. So what impacts have you seen for sellers on this? Have sellers been able to cope with it? Are the sellers you've spoken to, are they still doing SFP, or are they going to can it and either do FBA or merchant fulfilled network? Or what are sellers doing? Are they even able to get carrier collections at the later times and at the weekends?
Yeah, so So there's a couple of things. So I'll speak briefly about like what I saw when I was at Amazon, and I also speak about our experience at Olsam, because SFP is something that we've looked into as well, and that's partly driven by FBA restock limits, which we're gonna come on to later. But firstly, so from what I saw from speaking with sellers and what I saw at Amazon, I think it's a real mix. So typically, what you would see is for larger sellers. And when I say larger sellers, I mean sellers who send higher volumes daily. They, in a lot of cases, were already doing weekend collections and later cutoffs anyway. And when I say larger sellers, I mean sellers doing thousands of units a week. In some cases, hundreds, but thousands of units a week in general. So for them, these changes weren't a massive change for them. It was simply just going into Seller Central and opting into Saturday or Sunday weekend collection on in your shipping template, and the same changing your cutoff on Monday to Friday. So on definitely at the upper echelon of the size of seller, there wasn't much change. The sellers that are most affected are the medium sized and smaller sellers. So the medium sized sellers, there is probably some give because they probably, well, it's unlikely they were working both weekends and later during Monday to Friday. However, given their volumes, there probably is a way for them to, at least for their carrier, opt into weekend collections and do later cutoffs. It really comes down to a decision for them. Does it make sense for them to do? And I totally appreciate for a lot of sellers, they've been used to working Monday to Friday. They're putting in a lot of time Monday to Friday into their business. They don't want to work Saturdays and Sundays as well. So for these sort of medium-sized sellers, it was it really came down to their choice. Like, do they make the decision or not? And I don't know the exact number, but like from my experience, I'd say it's probably on maybe like 60-40, maybe like 60% of sellers weren't opting into it, because in the UK you have to opt into both. You have to do the weekends and you have to do the later cutoffs Monday to Friday in order to stay on SFP. So maybe about 60% of sellers just said no, we can't do that, or they did it until the end of June when they could and then dropped off. The smaller sellers, now these are sellers who don't really have much choice. So either they need to somehow increase their volumes to even get their carriers to consider them for weekend collections, because carriers will only do weekend collections for larger sellers. And if they're able to do that, then they make a decision. But for a lot of them, the decision was made for them. So that's what I saw at Amazon. For us, we're in a lucky position at Olsam because we own quite a few brands, so we have high volumes. And in the UK, we were thinking about doing SFP. It just didn't work for us from a margin perspective at the moment. It's something that we will maybe look into in the future. But yeah, it's not something that we're going to look at now. We're going to try and optimize FBA, and we'll go on to that later about how we're trying to do that. But on SFP, it's not something we're looking to do now.
Because I guess merchants have got a number of choices. They can, number one, comply with the weekend collection and the later cutoff times. Number two, they could say, okay, let's rely on FBA. Number three, they could say, okay, is there an external fulfillment house that we could use that can qualify us for SFP? And number four is they can say, okay, we just won't worry about qualifying for Prime. We'll just do merchant fulfilled network and ship when we feel like it. And the advantages of some of those options of compliance are you keep the Prime badge, which increases sales. The advantage of saying, okay, hands up, we'll just do MFM, is you don't have the expenses, but you lose the Prime badge. So it's kind of a no-win, no-win in some cases. And I guess each individual business has got to make their own decisions on this.
Yeah, exactly. I would say one thing on that is that, like this time last year, a lot of what I saw at Amazon was that sellers, even without the Prime badge, they were getting so many orders that they were out of stock a lot of the time. This time last year when COVID started. So it actually wasn't that much of an issue last year. So I think some sellers maybe have made the decision to maybe drop off SFP because they've seen the uplift that they saw last year. It's just my opinion. I don't think that's going to last. As things open up and people go out and don't order as much home, I think it will revert at least some back to the Prime badge is going to be the one with the biggest uplift. So That's just my opinion. I mean, some sellers may have dropped off to move on to FBA. I don't know that for sure. But yeah, that's just a bit of advice that I would give to sellers.
I guess it also depends a bit on the product set, because I know if I'm on the Amazon app and I'm looking to buy something, if I'm in a hurry for something, I'll probably click that little button at the top of the app that says Prime because I want it in a hurry.
Yeah.
And at other times, if I'm buying a shirt or something that I'm not that fussed about it arriving tomorrow, if it's 2-3 days, it's fine. I'd rather have a greater selection and not click that Prime button. So I kind of know as a consumer that if I click the Prime button, I'm going to see less items, but I get them faster. And if I don't click the Prime button, I'm getting greater selection. But don't be surprised if it doesn't arrive tomorrow. So I think consumers will make that choice as well.
That's funny you say that, because me, I just always click the Prime filter. I always just go straight on, click Prime, and that's all I'll buy. So I never even see the non-Prime stuff.
So for you, it's a bit bad news for those that don't qualify for Prime either through SFA, SFP, or FBA.
Yeah, or Amazon retail as well. I mean, those are the three options, because Amazon's own products go into Prime as well.
Yeah. So there's some changes there, and on the basis of those changes, it does sound like FBA is a really, really attractive option for the volumes that I'm selling on Amazon. But we've had changes there as well. Can you just walk us through what changes have happened with FBA recently? Because I know I've been looking at things like restock limits and IPI, and could you explain what that means? And there's been quite a lot of concern there from sellers on what's actually happening.
Yeah. So it's interesting how both these changes have happened around the same time. It wasn't designed to be that way. So the FBA changes have come about really exacerbated by COVID and like capacity constraints on Amazon side, and the SFP changes came, as I said, from a customer experience speed point of view, but they've just happened to occur at the same time. So yeah, on the FBA side, there have been a couple of changes. So first, on the restock limits. So this time last year, restock limits were applied on products by Amazon on at a SKU level. So each of your SKUs would have a limit or a number you could send in and have in an Amazon fulfillment center at any one time. Earlier this year, they changed that. Well, back in May, they changed that from a SKU level to an account level. So now each of your accounts has a restock limit of, I don't know, 1,000 or 100 or whatever. So that's the first change. The second change is around Ipi Score. Quickly explain what Ipi Score is.
I was going to say, what is IPI?
Yeah. So Ipi Score is what it stands for, Inventory Performance Index, and it's Amazon's way of measuring the health of the inventory that you have in a fulfillment center. So just the way to think about it, if you have a higher IPI score, that's good. Lower IPI score is bad. And if your IPI score is over 500, then that means you have, in theory, unlimited storage. So you can store as many items in an Amazon fulfillment center as you want to. However, the IPI score is lower in priority than the new restock limits that have come in. So we come on to that in a bit, but a lot of sellers will have IPI scores of over 500, 600, whatever, but they'll still have restock limits applied on their accounts.
And I think it's also worth pointing out that Amazon have been changing the IPI thresholds over the last year. So they've gone up and down. They've said, okay, you've got to have a higher IPI score, or suddenly they said, actually, we're going to have an IPI of 400, and suddenly everyone that thought they were okay are no longer okay.
Yeah. So the last change went from 450 to 500. So the way Amazon determine if you're if you are eligible for the unlimited capacity is they will take 2 snapshots beforehand. So I think for the last IPO score change that went from 450 to 500 was a few weeks ago. I think it was end of June or beginning of July. So in May, they take a snapshot of all sellers, every single seller who has any inventory in FBA. They'll say, okay, this is what your IPO score is at the moment, and they will send an email or a notice saying, these changes, we're going to make these changes coming up. Your IPI score is X at the moment. It needs to be, above 450 at this date for you to be eligible. And then in June, they took another snapshot. And then if you were, below 500 in June, then you have limits. If you're above 500 in June, I've forgotten the date, I think it was mid-June some point, then you have unlimited storage capacity throughout Q3. And they will change that again. They'll do it again in Q3 for Q4.
So that IPI score is important, but there's these restock limits as well. What is the impact of changing a restock limit from a Skew limit to an account limit?
Yeah. So like if you think of it, it's quite a simple and subtle change, but it does have quite a big effect. So on all your SKUs before, there used to be a limit, 50, 100, 10, whatever it was. And then basically what Amazon are doing is they're just adding that all up and giving an account level limit now. And the reason they did that is because a lot of sellers complained, rightly so, before that when they launched new products, they didn't have a limit that, they had like low limits. It was skewed towards the old SKU level limits were skewed towards existing products, and it's difficult to launch new products. So they gave something on an account level, so sellers have more flexibility about which SKUs they can choose to send in and out. So in theory, that's the theory. But then what we've noticed in practice is that the restock limits are changed quite often, and it's difficult to predict which direction they're going to go, what number they're going to be at, and when they're going to do it. So that's made it difficult for us for a few reasons. One, on growth, it's probably constrained our growth a bit. The supply chain complexity as a result of it, and it's also increased our margin pressure. And I'm sure lots of sellers listening to this will felt the same thing, and I can go into more details on all of them. But that's basically what we've noticed. So they change them pretty often, and sometimes it's just incredibly difficult to predict which way they're going to go. And what we've noticed is so we own quite a few brands. Across all the brands, our limits have gone down by about 2/3, up to 2/3 in some cases, which we just didn't expect. So I think from what I can see, a lot of sellers have been affected in the same way.
And I guess one of the biggest issues is if you've got a large quantity of a relatively slow-moving product, and you've maybe put 3 months stock in FBA. Let's say you sell 1,000 a month, and you put 3,000 units in. That's going to severely limit the capacity you then got available for another product that maybe sells 10 a day, and you'd like to put a month's worth in, so you need to put 300 in. But because you got 3,000 of this other product, you can't put 300 of your top-selling product in.
Yeah, exactly, and we've seen this as well. So like we've got on a few of our brands, we've got we've got a few different SKUs on them, and then there'll be a couple of SKUs that are what we call hero ASINs. They sell super quickly. The run rate on those is crazy. So we've got an account level limit, but once we've sold through those, we still have stock in the FC for our other SKUs, but then the restock limit might drop, and then we're faced with a decision. So we can't sell more units of our hero SKUs, and then we either have to lower the price of the SKUs that we've already got in there, the lower the slower selling items, or remove them, or like do a deal or something on them, and all of them, all of those options hit our margin. So yeah, that's sort of the conundrum that we're facing, and I'm sure a lot of others.
So basically, the way you're dealing with it is this decision of, do I slash my margins and liquidate the stock in one way or another? Do I remove some of the stock and get it back home, and then I've got the problem of where to store it rather than Amazon having the problem, but that frees up room for my hero product inventory that I can put more of in. So this must have caused sort of quite a bit of frustration, because I know a lot of sellers kind of got caught out on this, and it was announced, but it came in relatively quickly after the announcement. And they were sat there with inventory. They wanted to sell them send to Amazon that they knew would sell, but they couldn't because they've got other stock. So as a business, which decision was the most common for you? Did you actually remove any from inventory, or did you slash prices, or do you say, okay, well, I'll sell my inventory on another platform in the meantime, and I'll just leave it to sit there until some of the stock sells at full margin, and then rebalance inventory that way. Give us some advice or guidance or tips on how to make this decision.
Yeah, I mean, this is yeah. We found out at the same time as everybody else. So it's been like a big learning curve over the last couple of months. So firstly, on your last point, we're focused on Amazon. So we haven't looked until now to sell off Amazon. The products we've already got in the inventory, like our operations are set up to get everything into Amazon. So we haven't looked so far to go off Amazon. It's something we will potentially look at in the future. But then on your other points, yeah, we've tried a bit of everything, and we've just tried a bit of everything. We've got a fantastic team who've been able to iterate and test things out. But I'd say I'd probably group it into two different things. With the changes, there's one sort of bucket is managing the changes, and then the other bucket is what you can do to try and increase your restock limits. So I sort of treat them both slightly differently. So first, on the managing changes side, so there's a few different things that we've done. Firstly, we've just basically had to change the structure of our supply chain. So it used to be that we've got manufacturers developing products mostly in China. We would order in bulk from China, send them direct to an FC. They'd all do the labeling in China, send them direct to an FC. FC would stock it, customer orders, boom, gone. But then what we've had to do with this is that because of the restock limits, we can't do that. And we can't also then reduce our quantities that we're ordering from manufacturers, because that's really going to hit our margin as well. So what we've done is we've developed relationships with 3PLs in the US, in the UK, and in Europe. So basically, we do exactly what we used to do. We send the items from China or our manufacturers straight to our 3PLs, and then from our 3PLs, we drip feed the products direct into an Amazon FC. So that gives us a bit more control on the margin side. So that's the first thing. Second thing is basically what I was saying at the end. We've really moved from sending high quantities, but high quantities of items in each shipment, but a low number of shipments per month. And we flip that around the other way to sending low quantities, but in more shipments. And it's partly because we're having to estimate what's going to happen with the restock limits, and act quickly when a restock limit increases. Straight away, we want to send in items because you don't know if that's going to drop the next week. So on the supply chain side, that's what we've been doing. We've also looked into SFP and fulfilled by merchant, but both of those for us just didn't really work. SFP at the moment on the margin side, fulfilled by merchant, you don't get the Prime badge. The other thing that we're looking into right now, and I'll maybe advise sellers to look into, is carton size. So there's obviously a limit, a minimum quantity that most sellers would send in. And that's because if you're ordering direct from supplier and you don't open the box and repack it, there's going to be a minimum number in each carton that's coming over. So let's say, just for argument's sake, that there's 100 units in one carton from your supplier. But then there's also a maximum restock limit that you have, and let's say your maximum restock limit is 250 or something. So realistically, you can only send 2 cartons in, and you're leaving yourself 50 units short. So in order to maximize our restock or the use of our restock limits, we've been looking into working on the supply chain side to try and be a bit more flexible with the carton sizes.
Yeah, because I guess if you've got 200 in stock, you can't send another carton of another 100 in.
Exactly.
But if you had 50 in a carton, when you got below 200, you could send another carton in. So
exactly. So it's about being flexible, and this is the word I'm going to use again and again. It's about being flexible, because just because the restock limits are changing so often, and it's so difficult to predict what's going to happen, when a change does happen, you need to be able to act quite quickly. I guess that kind of brings me on to the second thing I was saying about trying to increase your restock limits. So we've looked at how to deal with the changes. The next thing is, at least from our point of view, we don't want to just sit around dealing with them. We want to try and increase the limits. So for our faster selling SKUs, we can send them in and grow. So a few things we've looked at. So first, I know a lot of sellers are going to probably scoff at this, but is setting up cases with seller support to try and increase the restock limit on our accounts.
Does it work?
Low success rate so far, but it's simple, it's free, and it's not that time consuming. So, yeah, from my point of view, I think it's worth doing. It's not going to take a lot of your time. You can just have one standard template that you've used once and just copy and paste it each time it does change. So, that's something we've been doing. Yeah, low success rate, but we'll keep trying. The second thing, and this is probably the most important thing, is run rate. So the biggest correlation we've noticed between to see our restock limit increase or decrease has been down to the run rate on the products in each of our accounts. So, for example, after Prime Day, we had quite a few products on deals, and we saw massive increase in order quantities. The restock limits the next week, they changed very quickly, and they increased for some of ours by thousands. So we've been looking at ways to increase our run rate. So whether that's through deals or PPC, that's one way to increase the number of sales, and through that increase your run rate. And that can sometimes be a lever to pull on the issue I said before. If your hero SKUs have gone and you're left with a load of slow moving SKUs, what do you do with them? You don't want to remove them, and you don't want to reduce the price too much. Maybe try the PPC side. So that's one thing.
By PPC, you're meaning Amazon sponsored products, sponsored brands.
Correct. Yeah, exactly. So we've been trying that. One thing I should have mentioned before is on the restock limits. One thing we've changed process-wise internally is be super disciplined on checking our restock limits. So because they change so often, we now check at least once a week on each of our brands the restock limits on the account. So I would recommend sellers check at least once a week, and be disciplined about it. Don't just have a look in Seller Central and forget it. Like make an Excel template, like put it by. Well, most sellers will have one brand or one account, but just on an account level, see what your restock limit is, monitor it week on week, and then you'll be able to see patterns. And then when your restock limit does change, move quickly to either whether it's remove products or whether to send items in, because you don't want to be left in this sort of purgatory where you're trying to make a decision and then the restock limit drops even further because you're not making sales on your biggest products, and then you're just pressured every week from there. So that's probably the biggest advice I would give. Move quickly and be disciplined on checking what your limits are.
Yeah, I guess for many sellers, it is tough that these changes have both come together, because my natural reaction to running out of restock limit space for FBA would be, well, why don't I just do some on SFP? But then the increases in the metric demands on SFP are telling me, oh, SFP is going to be too expensive because I've got to pay staff and open up a Saturday and pay for a Saturday collection. Let's move towards FBA. So these two changes coming at the same time, they're kind of hitting me from both sides. Yeah. But I think it's really interesting. I think that the things to really take away from this are that it is all about the customer at the end of the day. We know Amazon's claim to be the most customer-centric company on the world. And they do obsess about the customer, and these changes are largely not to benefit merchants, but they are to benefit the customer at the end of the day. But also, I think it's really interesting the point you made about your run rate, that Amazon do reward success. And as with any business, if you go to a fulfillment house and say, hey, I've got 10,000 units or something, and I think it'll take me 3 years to sell them, they'll be like, well, how about we take 1,000 units, and when we sold 1,000, you come back and replenish them. Amazon don't want their warehouse taken up with stock that's not selling. And how you actually manage your stock in those warehouses, I think, is where the challenge comes, because now it's not one SKU that's lagging and maybe incurring long-term storage charges. It's all of your SKUs that are now lagging on the business, either because they're sat there not selling, or they're not there because you can't send them in.
Yeah.
So it's interesting times. So tell us a little bit more about Olsam. You've got countless different businesses that you've acquired. Is there a category or a product type that you've seen more pressure on than others? I'm thinking, is there more pressure on the kitchen spatula that the business than there is on an electronic business or a fashion business, or garden furniture is probably flying out the door at the moment, or garden tools? Are there any businesses you've seen that actually restock limits have been more of an acute pressure compared to another where there's less of a pressure? Should I be worried because of my category, or is it just across the board on all of the businesses?
Yeah, so the restock limits have been applied across all businesses, all accounts. So it doesn't matter, how much you've been selling. You still have a restock limit. It might just be a really high one. I haven't noticed any patterns across categories. Where sales are dropping of certain items, you'd expect directionally for the restock limits to also drop. So if you, so for example, earlier this year and last year, people were at home, gyms were closed, so people were, buying a lot of workout equipment to work out from home. But now as gyms have opened and things have opened up, the restock limits on those you would possibly expect to fall because there's less demand from them, for those from people. But in terms of categories, I wouldn't say there's a serious pattern across them. It just depends on what kind of products, on the run rate of the products you're selling. There are some extremely niche categories that we looked at like some really interesting businesses, extremely niche categories that you find on Amazon that you just wouldn't think would see an increase, but lots of people are buying them. So I wouldn't say there's a pattern on any category, no.
So I think that the important takeaway from this then is it's not Amazon beating up on your business. It is all about the customer and managing the capacity they've got along with the customer expectations. But you're in the business of acquiring FBA businesses. And I'm not saying everyone listening today is ready to sell their business, give up, and can't do SFP anymore. FBA, I've got restock limits. I'm up against a brick wall. Let's sell up. But there will be some people that are ready to sell their business. If you were looking at a business that was right up against restock limits, and maybe they got an IPI above 500, but they've still got restock limits just holding them back. If you acquired that business, what would your strategy be? Would it be to sell in Europe and the US where you can have fresh restock limits, or is there something you can do to? Is it pay more for sponsored products, sponsored brands, or price offers and deals to cut margins? Yes, but increase run rate through to get a higher restock limit. What sort of things would Olsam look at strategy that merchants themselves could look at?
Yeah, that's a really great question. I think first we would try to understand why, why the restock limits were at such high pressure for this business. Like we would buy a business, assuming we're buying this business, we're doing it because we like the products. We like the products. They're good products that are going to sell, and we think we can grow the business. So there's got to be a reason why these products are being pressure. Maybe it's because maybe it's like a seasonal thing. Maybe it's that they're selling Christmas items in the summer, or they're just so slow selling SKUs, and then they've reached the point where they've sold out their hero SKUs, and the slow selling SKUs are just putting pressure on their account. So we try and really assess why that is. We definitely speak with the seller to understand that, understand where the category is going, and then once we have a good picture of why that is, then we try and tackle it, mainly using the same levers that I mentioned before. So we see, does it make sense to, are these products going to sell? If they're not going to sell for whatever reason, does it make sense to remove them? Does it make sense to reduce the price, put them on a deal? Will advertising work? Those are the key levers that we would look through. But it's important to remember all of those would add pressure on the margin. So from a seller's point of view, if you're in that position and you forget about trying to sell, if you sell your business, if you're in that position and you've got products that are just really impacting your account as a whole, sometimes I think it might make sense to just take the hit. And I think a lot of sellers have done that, and we've had to do that as well, because the direction I think Amazon is going, and some of this is influenced by aggregators like us just buying lots of businesses and becoming more professionalized, and also just e-commerce just growing as a whole across the last year, is that we're moving towards leaner SKU counts, but these SKUs are high, fast-selling SKUs. So the restock limits that Amazon have brought in have also moved sellers towards this, right? Because you're not incentivized at all to send in items that are just going to sit there. So you're only really incentivized to send in items that are going to sell quickly. And I think that's where I see the future going, where some sellers at the moment will have hundreds and thousands of SKUs, but I think we're going to start to see those SKU counts drop over time to at least an FBA, where you'll only see SKUs that are fast selling, that people are going to buy, so that Amazon's warehouses are always moving in and out rather than just products are sitting in there.
Nish, this has been fascinating. We are coming up against time for this webinar, so I want to really thank you for your expert insights today. And
thank you.
Just to summarize for people listening, SFP changes, 6 day a week working, you've got to work one weekend day, and you've got later cutoff times, which puts pressure there. FBA pressures with IPI limits and restock limits, but we covered lots of ideas on how to handle these. I think the big takeaway's got to be that Amazon are looking for, like you said, Nish, they're looking for a lean business that the products are selling, and if you the higher your run rate on a product, the more successful. So consider some of the ideas from Nish, like sending in smaller carton sizes, taking a hit on products that just aren't selling or are selling very, very slowly. If you've got them clogging up FBA, they're not going to let you send others in. But lots of ideas there. And Nish, if someone does want to get hold of you and just have a chat afterwards, how can they get hold of you? And indeed, I should have said, if anyone is looking to exit their business and wants to talk about an acquisition, how do they get hold of you?
Yeah, sure. So our business name is Olsam. So just Google Olsam, or just our website is www.olsamgroup.com. Or you can find me on LinkedIn. So just feel free to message me on LinkedIn. Just my surname's quite long, so just check in the description for my surname.
Yeah, I guess Olsam Nish will get you. OLSAM Nish. Yeah. We'll soon find you. Nish, thank you so much for your time today. It's been fascinating and really, really interesting as well. I think there's challenges out there, and I think these two changes are one thing that you can say are definitely a challenge for businesses. But thank you for the suggestions and strategies for actually coping with them.
No, thanks a lot, Chris. Really enjoyed the discussion. Thanks for having me.